We are back, ladies and gentlemen, once again. JV wins, Dogon SS. Appreciate everybody who is tuning in. Appreciate everybody in advance who will tune in at a later point in time. We certainly appreciate everybody joining us along for this wild ride on the Conscious Approach channel on YouTube, soon to be available on several other platforms in the very near future. So be on the lookout for that. As we always like to say before we kick things off, if this is your first time catching wind of what we like to do over here, feel free to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, leave a comment, and let us know what you think about the commentary in this or any other video as we get things kicked off. And it kind of looks like I've lost my, there we go. I don't know what happened there. I must have hit the wrong button. Right, now we are definitely all set.
Yes.
JV wins. Dogon SS got several interesting topics to kick the tires and light the fires with tonight, so we will go ahead and get right into it. First thing that we are going to discuss are comments made by comedian Andrew Shulz in reaction to a line that Kendrick Lamar dropped on the intro track to his surprise album GNX, which certainly caught me by surprise, but it was a very pleasant surprise. It gave me something new to rock to, and I've been liking it so far. So shouts out to Kendrick for that. It is always nice to hear real music whenever it comes along. So much appreciation to Kendrick for doing that. But what has been talked about, probably more so than other things in relation to comments or content from his album, are comments that he made on the intro track, Whacked Out Murals, in which he talks about white comedians not talking about black women and how that shouldn't be allowed. And so there's been a couple of white comedians who have responded to that. The two that I know off the top of my head are Gary Owen and then also Andrew Shulz.
Gary Owen.
Two guys who, well, I'll just go ahead and get into the get into the article real quick. So to provide some context for anyone who is unaware of what's going on here, this says Andrew Shulz allegedly labels Kendrick Lamar too woke after his GNX diss. Andrew Shulz allegedly described Kendrick Lamar as too woke to DJ Academics after hearing his new album, GNX, on which he seemingly disses the comedian. While going over the lyrics for the album's intro track, Whacked Out Murals, Academics brought up the bar, "Don't let no white comedian talk about no black women, that's law." He said that when he reached out to Schulz about the line, the Brilliant Idiots co-star remarked, "Is this guy too woke to understand the joke?" As for the joke in question, Schulz came under fire over the summer for an episode of his Flagrant podcast in which he joked about a black girlfriend effect, in which a non-black man dates a black woman and gets a new look. They grow their beard because they need a cushion when they get slapped, he remarked at the time. I think the black girlfriend effect, it might be a protective instinct. Schulz guests on the episode, James Duncan and Fuhad Dawodu, later apologized for laughing, but Schulz refused to follow suit. As a clip of Academics sharing Schulz's reaction to the lyrics circulated online, fans took Lamar's side in the situation. Do people think just because you say something is a joke that immediately clears you of any wrongdoing you said? One user on X wrote on Saturday. O'Shea Jackson Jr. added, "That ain't what y'all call woke or even the original and true meaning of woke. That's just a black man speaking to other black men." Schulz isn't the only person Lamar dissed on Whacked Out Murals. He's already made headlines for mentioning Lil Wayne and their feud over the Super Bowl halftime show. Check out Academics relaying Andrew Schulz's response to Kendrick Lamar below. So I'm not going to play that clip because it's just nothing. It's just Academics saying Schulz said, is Kendrick too woke to understand the joke? There's not much to there, so it will be a waste of 30 seconds to play that clip. So we'll just go ahead and disregard that. But of course, all relevant links are in the description of this video. So if you want to see that clip for yourself, go ahead and check that out. With respect to Schulz and him actually making those comments, he made those comments directly to academics. But if you want to see the original comment that allegedly spurred Kendrick saying this, the link also allows you to check out the YouTube clip from that podcast episode from back in the summer when Schulz said what he said. So, allegedly, according to your boy, DJ Academics, Schulz has responded to Kendrick's line by questioning whether Kendrick is too woke to take a joke. Do you think Schulz has a point in questioning Kendrick for being too woke, or do you think Schulz needs to take a seat?
Uh, funny. I think Schultz overall needs to take a seat. I think him as a person need to take a seat, several seats. And here's my thing with Schultz or anybody else like him. So this is for the Adam 22s or the DJ Vlads that loiter outside of our stuff, our cultural things, and weigh in a lot. And Schultz, he's got uh the Negro card with the fact that he's buddy with Charlemagne, so he feels like he could weigh in with things. And his brand of comedy, for the most part, is getting at everybody. That's his shtick as far as hey, I make fun of all groups of people, so it is what it is with that. So I'm a comedian, uh, you know, leave me alone kind of thing. So he has his angles of stuff, but at the same time, he weighs in on things, whether he's joking or not. In this context, what I'm talking about is the woke thing. He weighs in kind of like how Vlad does or Adam 22 does, as if their opinion matters. Um, Kendrick, I feel as though Kendrick is setting a boundary, setting a standard for what he feels like should be going on out here culturally, um, not just within our community, but American culture, and telling non-black comedians to back up. Even if you date black women, this is not your place. So of course Schultz is going to say what he says, but he always says what he says, and he's a bit of a smart aleck. And yeah, he's a guy that throws stones and hides his hands. So in this context, I mean, I think that he's out of bounds in the sense that Kendrick is too woke. I feel like that's a label that Kendrick, it's as a what do you want to how I say as a stigma. People just want to automatically label him too woke or too conscious or whatever. But I don't think he's too woke at all. I think he's who he is, and I think his opinions and thoughts are much needed in today's culture. So I don't think he's too woke, and I think Schultz is doing the same thing of what DJ Vlad did, which I criticized Vlad for, where he was like, "Oh, the mixing wasn't good," and it's like, well, I don't care what you have to say. Um, you know, what is he getting at when he's saying these things? And I think what Kendrick is getting at is that yeah, nobody else is running around here doing this, talking about any other group of women like that. So back off. So what are your thoughts on Kendrick saying what he has to say, and then Schultz's rebuttal, I guess, to this whole situation, saying that Kendrick's a little too woke for his own good? What are your thoughts, man?
I think he's wrong calling Kendrick woke, but I also don't fault him for taking the position that he's taking. Comedy's under attack. Comedy is under attack by legitimate wokeness.
Mm-hmm.
What Kendrick did isn't woke though. Kendrick just made a critique about something that he doesn't particularly fancy when it comes to things that white comedians do.
Okay.
That to me isn't woke. That's just him making an observation, which is what things like comedy are supposed to elicit. So I think they both have a place.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of weeks ago, when we talked about RDC, I mentioned how I feel for artists, particularly comedians, because in this current climate, they're having to figure out on the fly how to still be comedians in the wake of an overcorrection of political correctness when it comes to art,
Mm-hmm.
and how comedy is actually being assaulted as a result of this, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And one of the comedians that I mentioned as a case study for this, I actually mentioned two individuals. Both of them are white comedians. I mentioned Lisa Lampanelli and I mentioned Amy Schumer. Back when the two of them were at the peak of their popularity and they had stand up specials on Comedy Central, I
Mhm.
would watch them because I personally am a fan of stand up comedy. I admire the art form, I admire the craft, and anybody who is courageous enough, bold enough, and vulnerable enough to actually be or do stand up comedy, I'm going to give it a chance because I respect what it takes to actually attempt it. So as a result, some of these comedians they'd have their stand up specials, and I would watch just to see what their bit was all about. And those two comedians in particular, Lisa Lampanelli and Amy Schumer, a large portion, not all, but a large portion of their stand up routine was illuminating how, in light of the fact they are overweight white women, they date black men.
Mhm.
So they would make jokes talking about how white men reject them because they're overweight and they're out of shape. But where can they go and find attention? They can go to black men and get attention because despite the fact that they are overweight, they are nonetheless overweight white females. And that is something that apparently black men covet. And and it would get a whole lot of laughs and people would, do all of this stuff. Now, me personally as a black guy who abhors that brand of comedy, I didn't particularly appreciate it. I didn't like it. I didn't like it because I'm a black guy who prefers women who are in shape. Whether I don't care what your race or color is, I'm not one of these black dudes out here thirsting for overweight white women. If you're not in particular shape, you can keep it moving. And there's a lot of other black guys who are like that, who are like me. They share in that sentiment. And so that is a broad generalization used by these two particular comedians in order to get a laugh and in order to sort of curate a stand up routine out of that kind of overgeneralized sentiment. I
Mhm.
didn't particularly appreciate it. Now, did I think that they needed to be ostracized from comedy as a result? Did I think that they needed to be blackballed? Was I the type of person who was going to complain, call Comedy Central and talk about this online and put comments on message boards and hop to Reddit complaining about this because I feel like they needed to be, you know, just permanently removed from the face of comedy? No, because I think as much as I detest that form of comedy, it has a place within the ecosystem of art, not because they are right or wrong, but because what they are saying nevertheless generates some kind of conversation, which I think is the point of all of this. And so while I don't necessarily appreciate that brand of comedy because it doesn't speak to my sensibilities, my thought was let them stick around and do what they do. The market will dictate whether they need to be gone or not. It's not for me to say she doesn't have a place in comedy because all comedians have their own brand of comedy and it is what it is.
Mhm.
For me to leap to the conclusion that they need to be fired or removed from Comedy Central or never be given an opportunity again would have been an overcorrection on my part, which in my opinion would be woke, quote unquote. Kendrick didn't do that. Kendrick made an observation no different than the observation that I make whenever I say I don't like Lisa Lampanelli joking about black guys who like overweight white women. Kendrick didn't say Andrew Schulz needs to be, removed from comedy, fired. Well, allegedly, if Andrew Schulz is the comedian that Kendrick is speaking on, because we don't know that, Kendrick
Mhm.
didn't mention no names. He just spoke about the penchant for certain white comedians to do such a thing. And
Mhm.
he wasn't saying get rid of them, remove them, fire them. They need to be reprimanded. I demand an apology. Kendrick was just making his comment based on the fact that he does not appreciate that brand of comedy. No different than I would make the observation that I don't appreciate Lisa Lampanelli or Amy Schumer's brand of comedy whenever they talk about black men who like overweight white women. So I don't think Kendrick is being woke in that regard. And so from that standpoint, I think Schultz is off base. However, if I'm being consistent, I also do believe Schulz should be allowed to do what he does. And if people don't like it, the market will bear it out and he'll go away. But I think that what he does has a particular place because it does spark needed conversation about the merit of that kind of content, of that kind of art, and of that kind of comedy. And if I am going to somewhat defend Andrew Schulz here, um, and it isn't really him that I'm defending specifically, I'm defending what he's responding to because I think what he's responding to is America's current propensity to demonize certain forms of art on the basis that there needs to be a certain level of sensitivity applied to them, thereby that art having to adhere to that sensitivity and comedians being silenced as a result. Some people can sidestep this because they don't care, like Chappelle. He'll still do his LGBTQ jokes and not care. It's almost as though he's too big to fail. But a lot of these comedians aren't in his position, and they are actually having to figure out how to navigate the landscape of comedy because they're being told that certain jokes are no longer applicable. They're being told that stuff that used to be okay 5 to 10 years ago is no longer okay because it's too offensive, and stuff is just not being permitted anymore. And opportunities in comedy are being taken away, or not necessarily handed out to the degree that they used to be handed out, because like big Hollywood comedy apparatuses don't want to run the risk of having a comedian commit what in today's current culture would be considered a faux pas. And I think what he's responding to is that the ecosystem around the assault on comedy. And I do, in my opinion, I do believe stand up comedy is being attacked, in my opinion. That's not to say that I think Andrew Schulz is this great stand up comedian, but he is a comedian with skin in the game, nevertheless. And I do believe that if a comedian in his position feels some type of way about their perceived art form being assaulted or put under attack, I can't necessarily fault him for that, because I do think it's unfortunate that in a lot of respects, comedians are having to double back and figure out a plan B because they can't do what they've been trained to do for as long as they can remember, because what they have been good at for so long is now not okay slash offensive slash inappropriate slash insensitive. And I think that that's what he was responding to. So I guess I'm not really taking a stance either way. I think everybody's right, not necessarily right, but I see where everyone's coming from. I think he was wrong in labeling Kendrick as too woke, because he's not being woke. He's doing what comedy is supposed to do, which is you do something, I respond to it. That's the point of it. And I think where we've jumped the shark when it comes to comedy in particular is when you silence these individuals and prohibit them from doing this, we can't in turn proceed to have those thought provoking conversations, which is what the thought of comedy, which is what the point of comedy is supposed to be. So is Kendrick woke? No. But does Schulz have a point to respond to anti wokeness when it comes to comedy? In my opinion, yeah. And I also think that Kendrick, much like me responding to Lisa Lampanelli, has a point in saying, I don't appreciate that kind of comedy.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. But my stance with Schultz is because I have a stance on him, and like I said, the Adam 22s or the DJ Vlads. And again, I said that they kind of loiter. They just hang around. Nobody asks these people for any of their opinions ever, but they just loiter around our stuff and weigh in on our stuff all the time.
Our stuff, as in what? In the
Any
case of Schultz, because I know what you mean about Vlad and Adam 22, but in the case of Schultz, who's a comedian, what do you mean by our
Well,
stuff?
he does podcasts and stuff, and he's always talking about topics. And so when I say our stuff, I mean things that are headlined by you know uh, certain celebrities, so certain rappers, certain things that are going on. and he'll be talking about those things. He doesn't run a hip hop platform, but he'll be talking about that stuff, amongst other things. But he loiters around and weighs in and gives his opinion because Charlemagne is the buffer for that. Because Charlemagne's around, so he's gonna bring up stuff. And then because Charlemagne is bringing up stuff within our community, here comes Schulz with his take on what's going on in our community.
So is that not more Charlemagne's fault than Schulz?
Well, no, it's Schulz because Schulz is hiring Charlemagne. So here's my thing. Well, again, when I'm talking about these people, I'm talking about these people that, again, want to weigh in on our stuff and hang around and just be talking and giving talking points. And if there's anything that comes up that is like in this case where Kendrick Lamar has his thing to say, whatever. Now I guess this is his realm. This is Schultz's realm because he mentioned comedy. So Schultz saying something, I guess. But still, it's a thing where it's kind of it's like they have cow prods. These guys, they have cow prods. They I don't want to give them whips, but they got cow prods, and they just keep us in this state of thought, being hey, stay in the cage, hey, Nixon ain't good, he's too woke, because woke is, and it is taken as a 4-letter word. So it's a negative connotation to it. And Kendrick's too much for his own good. And then there's going to be people that are listening to this and it's like, yeah, man, I agree. Because he be talking about all these topics that, blah, 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 blah. And he is a little too woke for me. And it's a way of getting the mind to think a certain way and stay in a box. Instead of listening to what Kendrick had to say about this situation and doing what you say about the Lisa Lampanelli thing and having more of us think like how we don't care for this, so we're not going to check for it. Because Kendrick was pretty much talking to us, not anybody else. So when he's making that statement, I mean, overhearers can overhear it and they can have their opinion about it. But Kendrick was more or less talking to people that were similar to him. And so he's saying that, hey, that's law. And so by saying that that's law, it gives the listener ammunition to go, you know what? I don't really care. I never really cared for that. But, Kendrick's right, man. I never really liked that and I don't care for it. So Bill Burr, for instance, he has a black wife. And he brings up his black wife a lot, but he when he's talking about his wife, he's talking about his wife. He's not talking about how black his wife is. He's not like the other guy. I forgot the guy's name that you said has something to say. He's always
Gary Owen.
Yeah, Gary Owen. He's got to do the black voice. He's got to get sassy. He's got to do all this stuff. And people be eating it up. I don't get it.
Well, he was married to a black woman as well.
I know. But he does he takes it the other way is what I'm getting at. So that's why I said Bill Burr is more or less respectful about it in a sense where he's like, yeah, I got a black wife and, whoop-de-whoop. And it's well known, but whenever he's doing his wife comedy, it's wife comedy, not black wife comedy. And that Gary Owens guy would be black women, black women, black women, white. I'm the white guy at the cookout comedy. And it's like, hey, all right. You know what I'm saying? I'm the odd guy out all the time comedy. And I don't get that lane, but people be going to his shows and laughing at him. And so it is what it is with that. He's not overtly offensive. So it's not that I have a problem with that. But what Kendrick is getting at here is that, hey, just ease up on that. Or for black people that are not okay with that, don't listen to him, like the Lisa Lampanelli stuff. Just don't do it. Like what he's doing is like how you said that you agree with is that, well, don't patronize this stuff. So yeah, I don't think that's too woke. I think that was in house, even though it's on wax, and that's how it was meant to be taken. And but Schulz, again, a guy on the outside, being a cow prodder, zapping people, and always got something smart to say. He's gonna say something like this to make Kendrick, to paint Kendrick in a bad light. So if you're picking up what I'm putting down here, it's just particular stuff that I don't care for, because I think what has gone on and what we complain about, I'll speak for myself, what I complain about here in hip hop culture, or what it's turned into, is that there is the actors as far as the rappers are concerned, and then there's the media people, and then there's also the labels that put people up to this stuff. And so the labels that put these rappers up to shoot them up, bang, bang, they need to go. And then these people on the outside that make sure that a certain mindset stays in bounds, they need to go. So I don't care for Schwartz, Vlad, or Adam 22, because of how they cover and hang around stuff that's supposed to be for us, and keeps everything in a cage. And if he really respected our culture, then he would understand what Kendrick was trying to get at there and not say anything at all, because he wasn't directly talking to him. But he has to do this because he has a platform, and he has to make sure that any one of us that overhears him stays in line, if that makes sense. So that's why I don't care for him. He says things that I laugh at. That don't mean I care for him. And for this, I disagree. With the fact that he thinks that Kendrick's being too woke, and I disagree for him saying anything at all. So I just don't care. I don't care for it one way or the other from Schwartz. I just keep his mouth shut.
Schwartz. I don't mind him saying something, because like I said before, I do have a certain modicum of respect for the art form that is comedy. Mm-hmm. And I do think that it needs to be preserved as much as possible, because mm-hmm. there's a place that it has within the social tapestry of America. And I think the more it's diluted, the more in danger it becomes of becoming extinct. Not mm-hmm. to necessarily suggest that Andrew Shulz is a vanguard for comedy, because mm-hmm. he's just, to me, he's just another comedian. He isn't anything particularly special. But having said that, if he wants to respond to what he perceives to be an attack on comedy, I can't necessarily fault him for that. There's more meat on the bones with this topic, and I don't want to have this go on longer. But the only thing that I'll say with respect to the notion that individual, I don't put Schulz in the same category as people like Vlad and Adam 22. For me, there's an extra level of exploitation inherent in what Adam 22 and Vlad does.
Agreed.
That I don't feel with Schulz or Gary Owen or some of these other comedians. I've just always cringed whenever they've done their black comedy bit. So as Lisa Lampanelli, as an example, as a black man, I don't want to hear jokes about how black men love overweight white women. That is an overgeneralization that, as a black man, I don't appreciate, because I don't like overweight white women. I don't like overweight women, period, let alone whether they're white or otherwise. I don't give a damn what color they are. If you're overweight, you probably need to do a couple of squats and snatches and cleans for me personally.
It's terrible.
But the point of it is to stir conversation so that we can actually talk on this stuff. And so I think he has a place in this. And then, just one other thing that you said that I'm kind of uncomfortable with is this idea that hanging around our stuff is tantamount to, consorting with hip hop, because I just don't believe hip hop is owned by black people. I think black people might participate in it at the highest level. I don't think we own it. We don't control the supply and demand of any of the commentary for the most part. We don't own who makes the majority of the money off of it, and we don't control the messaging. All of those things are controlled by people who don't look like black people.
Right.
And so the problem that I have with suggesting that you're Lord, and I'm just speaking toward that idea. Me personally, and this is why I've fallen back from hip hop in general, is because although we represent it from a participation standpoint more than other communities, from an ownership perspective and from a control perspective, we represent the least of that. And so that's why infiltrators like Adam 22 and Vlad can come in and do their thing, because the people who control the supply and demand of the product look more like them than look like us.
Exactly. So
Um,
they control the slaughterhouse. The people that look like them control the slaughterhouse, and then they are on the outside with the cow prods, making sure everybody stays on the conveyor belt.
if you want to look at it that way, that's fine. I
That
just
was
think,
my whole analogy.
yeah, I get that, and that's okay. Me, I'll just say that I don't think Schultz, somewhat to his credit, engages in the same level of exploitation that those other guys do.
No, it's
Um,
different.
yeah, and I do think that at the end of the day, Schultz is speaking up for the art form of comedy. And right or wrong, fair or unfair, because again, I don't I've seen some of Schultz stand-ups. I don't think they're funny. Like, I don't think that Schultz is funny. But he's got enough skin in the game for me that if he wants to speak up on behalf of what he perceives to be an attack on comedy, I understand where he's coming from with that, because I do believe that comedy is under attack. But I think it's a conflation to attach Kendrick to that, saying that Kendrick is too woke to understand a joke, because Kendrick is doing the exact same thing that I do when I complain about Amy Schumer and Lisa Lampanelli, which is that's their comedy, but I don't like it. And I don't like it for this particular reason. It all deserves a place within the ecosystem. And unless Kendrick is sitting up here saying these types of comedians need to go, which he's not, I think it is taking it a step too far to categorize him as being too woke. So that's kind of where I come from with that. But I do hear where you're coming from. This hip hop stuff, to me, respectfully to you, just gets a bit too dicey, because I think we sold this stuff out 20 years ago. And so for us to continue to hang on to that, talking about what is or is not artfully unique to us, is a bit of a fallacy, because we don't control it or own it. And that to me is a larger conversation than talking about, the individuals who are holding the cattle prods.
I got you. And I guess what I'm getting at is we do own and control our own thoughts. And it lays within the framework of what people call hip hop, which is not controlled by us, it's controlled by other people. And what I'm speaking of is the mental slavery aspect of getting out of certain forms of thought. And what Kendrick is doing is telling us that, hey, guys, you guys are on a conveyor belt. Take a step to the left.
So you're okay, yeah, okay. So you're
And so
speaking on behalf of the idea that Kendrick wasn't even actually talking to Schultz. He was talking to, like,
he was
Peter
speaking,
Jr.
right. He was speaking to the greater picture of get these types of thoughts. Stop allowing people to talk about you like that. And then so Schultz is saying, get back on that belt. And so there's the Adam 22s who bag and tag and throw the cows on the damn belt to begin with. And Schultz is somewhere down the line. He's not doing exactly what Vlad and them doing, but he's got the same instrument, making sure everybody stays in that same line of thought. And so that's where I don't agree with him and or anybody else. And I've lumped them all in the same boat because they're all hanging around our thoughts and they're telling us to think a certain way. Kendrick is talking about something spectacular in one of these songs, and here comes Vlad talking about mixing and mastering. And that's what I'm talking about. It's just a little zzz, zzz, and it's like, hey man, what is he trying to really say? And he's talking to us and saying that, hey, have more standards for what you accept of what people call comedy. Because a lot of people can put a lot of things under the guise of it being art. And so my thing is that Schulz does that very well. And so, like I said, there's ways that you could talk about race things like Dave Chappelle would do, where he's making stereotypical stuff, but at the same time, there's a high level to it, to where if you're catching or picking up what he's putting down, you can see how ridiculous being so stereotypical would land you, versus just making straight up stereotypical jokes. And so that's what Schulz does, and that's why he's not funny to me. So yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but you know, I look at this as I think Kendrick's on a mission, and whenever he says something, it is a little too woke, I guess, for Sir Schultz.
Well, that's just taking the word woke and applying it in whatever capacity you want, because that's not actual wokeness. I don't know, man. I hear all of that, but you know, like I said, I grew up on a lot of stand-up comedy, and I have throughout my years seen my fair share of black comedians commenting on white people. And it's not that, I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but it's not that far off from the types of things that Schultz does. So it just depends on where you're coming from with that. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of this is about positions of power. And I think it's easier to be able to get away with certain things when you're in a particular position of leverage. So, um, you know, there's definitely more meat on this. So I'm pretty sure there's going to be more to come. But I'm just looking at this from the standpoint of comedy. And I do think that comedy is under attack. I do. And I do think that it's unfortunate, but I also do think that it is unreasonable to categorize certain critiques of comedy as being woke, because that's just at that point using it as a trigger word. And I do think that that's what Schultz was doing when he used that word, because that's no different than what I do with some of the comedy that I comment on that I don't appreciate.
Word.
Shouts out to Kendrick, man. It's a great album. I've been running it back nonstop.
Yeah.